All right. Right. Yeah, so we're really excited. We want to continue to build that positive energy. Tomorrow is the first day back for teachers. Today is the first day back for teachers, and tomorrow is convocation. Convocation is a coming together and a welcoming of all of our employees. And so we're looking forward to that tomorrow, to build on this positive energy, share some of the goals for the district to move forward and areas of emphasis for the school year. Excited to announce that all of our vacancies are filled, which is no small feat, considering if you read the newspapers or listen to the radio or watch TV, there's no doubt that you've heard that there's a massive teacher shortage that districts are wrestling with from coast to coast across the nation. And so for us to be opening with all of our vacancies, teaching staff positions, paraprofessional positions, and coaching positions for athletics, they're all filled. So that's, again, no small feat. Great work to our admin team, who was very creative in going out and finding applicants, and all kinds of mechanisms, recruiting folks through traditional means, and then also reaching out to folks through social media and through professional networks. And we had a great opportunity to welcome these folks on. We actually had a decent number of applicants for many of our open positions, which also is highly unusual on top of this. So I think that continues to suggest that Lenox is continued as a destination for folks who want to work in education. So we're excited about that. And that's a real passion of mine, is to position it to be the employer of choice for folks. We're continuing with our implementation and rollout of Power School. So there's training going on in both buildings for teaching staff. We have training for some of our deep users, which would be some of our administrative professional staff. Our guidance counselors' schedules were built the first time through this year. And so again, probably the largest undertaking the school system can go through technology-wise is changing student information systems. And so I gotta say that Mr. McLeod and his team have done an amazing job. Thank you for everybody's work on that project and continued patience as we move toward Power School. That's going to give us a lot of operational efficiencies as we move forward. So we're really excited for that. We also recently had a backpack stuffing event at Morris with our business partners. So we had folks from eBank, Adams Community Bank, Berkshire Health Systems, and others come over and help fill backpacks and school supplies for students in need at Morris, so that they're starting the year prepared to learn. I forgot my book, but we also have a book study going on with our admin team on high expectations of learning from John Sapier. One of our colleagues got to with her. And
I know.
we're also taking a one Lenox one book approach. We asked our school committee if they'd also be interested in joining us in that book study, as well as our department chairs. And we may even expand that out to the whole teaching staff, because there's been so much interest in this book. So we're also excited to share that, because it ties back to our chief thrust this year, which is to focus on recentering teaching and learning, to really engage with our students on teaching and learning approaches to teaching in the classroom that are highly effective, as evidenced by data and outcomes that we can measure, and having conversations with our staff around data, and also instruction that's engaging. That's both emotionally engaging, behaviorally engaging, and cognitively engaging. So we want to make sure we're reaching our students' bodies, heart, and mind as we come back to the school year. And again, it's nice to not have to bring out fires and emergencies due to COVID. We can get back to the real work of what we do best, which is focusing on teaching and learning. Lastly, I also want to do a brief update on COVID. So there are no COVID restrictions or recommendations from DESE that would apply to us this year. And so we'll put out a message to folks saying that masks will be optional. We certainly have plenty of masks if folks want their children to wear masks and forget them. So we're definitely flush with PPE that's still left over. And we're also looking forward to getting back to school that is normal. There's no distancing guidelines or anything like that. We will continue to track cases just so that we can keep an eye on COVID as it moves throughout the year. And then if students are exhibiting COVID-like symptoms, they'll go down to the nurse. They'll be sent home, and we have enough test kits to send home with the child, asking parents then to administer the home test and get the results back to us, which again will safeguard us from a COVID outbreak in schools to the greatest degree we can, but also other things like the flu and cold, which historically we've always sent kids home with AIDS and those things. So that's a brief update of where we are. And then as I said, we have all of our hiring vacancies filled, and so we're welcoming this year some new employees. Teaching grade 5 or more, so Susan loves. Susan was a paraprofessional for us and is now hired as a teacher, so excited to welcome her to the grade 5 team. We also have Bethany Persing joining us from Greylock as a school adjustment counselor. Becky Basnet is joining us at LMHS as a math teacher. Stephen Lauren is also joining us as a math teacher from Central Berkshire. Justina Nunez is joining us to teach Spanish from Pittsfield Public Schools. Andrea Belair is coming to us as a librarian. She worked at the Clark and has a background in higher education and academia, and she's going to be a really great skill set. So I said that her as a librarian. And Jack Dwyer is coming to us as a math teacher, and he just recently relocated from the Greater Philadelphia area literally over the weekend. So we're excited to have all of our vacancies filled with high quality certified staff. And we also welcome, as we're aware, some new administrators to the team. At LMHS, new principal, Sal Ferrari, assistant principal, sorry, David Pugh, and they've been doing a great job of getting ready to open. I was over there this morning as they had their opening meeting to their teachers, and it was just, again, fantastic. I think it was very well received by the staff. Great time to come together and set some goals for the whole school to work toward. We also welcome Brian Kelly, who officially started as the Director of Student Services. He's doing a great job with parental outreach and building relationships. He's really hit the ground running for us in that capacity. And then Shannon Gagliaro is joining us as the Director of Food Services. And we've been super impressed by her in just a short period of time she's been with us. So she shared with Lee. But again, she's done a fantastic job, and she's actually providing breakfast the next couple of days for our staff as part of their back to school professional learning series. And so she's just been, again, hit the ground running, is learning and doing a great job already at heading up our food services. And that brings us to our final item in the superintendent's report, and we have a field trip request, and Amy B. Rich Jordan, Spanish teacher, is here to present the request and share some information about the proposed trip.
Amy, why don't you come up so that
So you guys have, I assume that you have the same link that I was sent, and if you click on that, you'll see some stuff that's different on this sheet, and then some of it that is the same. This is kind of like the cheat sheet version, I guess. So I'll just at the top, I talked about the purpose, and it's also on the request form, but this is a little bit more expanded. But the purpose of a field trip like this is to move students out of their okay. The purpose of this trip is to move students out of their comfort zone, to build their confidence, and to develop their cultural sensitivity, to begin to adapt to globalization, and most importantly, to be immersed in a second language. By accomplishing these purposes, we will be fulfilling the school's mission statement by supporting academic development, social and emotional growth, while encouraging lifelong learning and responsible citizenship. So we're providing this to students who are currently signed into Spanish 5 and Advanced Placement. And the reason why we are offering it to those students are a couple of different reasons. One is typically the average age for a Spanish 5 or AP student. We're talking juniors and seniors. And this being an international trip is definitely requiring a certain amount of maturity. These students need to be students that I can trust with everything that I have, you know, because we're going to be pretty far away. And a lot of the time, by the time these kids get to this grade, I've already developed a relationship with them because I've had them in the past, which is nice. So I do really know these kids pretty well. But most importantly, the second reason is because in this company, and at the very bottom, I gave put the logo there, and I talked a little bit about why I chose this program, which I've traveled with twice before. Well, I've traveled with 1.5 times before. But they specialize in small groups, and the reason is because this is not that huge EF tour field trip where you go and you get on the tour bus and you spend the entire time on the tour bus looking at things through the window, or a tour guide talking over the microphone. You know, there's a time and place for that. But this actually takes the small groups, and these kids are the ones who are ordering the tickets, and they're the ones who are looking at the Metro map and figuring out where to go, and they're the ones who are asking how much things cost. The adults don't do it. You know, we kind of sit back in the background, we encourage them. They're the ones that stick their head in the bus and say, is this bus going to? They talk to the hotel workers when we check in, and it gives them an opportunity to really use the Spanish that they've developed over the last however many years that they've been in the program. So we really use it as a culminating, super huge, almost project-based experience, and it gives them something to work towards, and it provides an experience that we can't possibly give them, you know, short of maybe going to Queens for the day or something like that. So that's a little bit about the background of the company and the purpose of the trip. This one in particular, last time we went to Madrid and Barcelona. This time we're looking at Madrid and Sevilla. It does mention that the minimum is 8 students. This company, again, is a great small company, actually out of New Hampshire, and he has allowed us to go with groups smaller than that in the past, which was really helpful. You have, again, in combination with this sheet and the one that's on the, you know, your agenda. You have a lot of information, but it does have the program fee, and it has an optional cancellation insurance for an extra $71. But there are some things that are included already. Those are things like the travel insurance is already included, and that includes trip interruption, travel delay, lost or delayed baggage, emergency medical expenses, or trip cancellation due to sickness or medical emergency. There is a cancellation policy. It gives you a couple different levels depending on how far out it is. And besides that, the fee pretty much includes everything with the exception of spending money and I believe lunches. And if we determined that we wanted to do a collaborative transportation to, you know, Logan, which would be something we would discuss with the students and the families much closer to the date, then that would be out of pocket as well. But in my experience, usually families like to come to the airport and say their goodbyes, and we usually manage really well carpooling that and stuff, and that's a little bit less money for the students. I'm not sure what else. I mean, you see the accommodations on there and the transportation. Obviously, we'll be flying there from Madrid to Sevilla. We'll take the high-speed train AVE, and then we'll be flying home from Sevilla. While we're there, we'll be using public transportation, but that's all included in the price. And the chaperone is going to be me. I don't expect there to be 16 kids going, but I suppose if there were, which would be great, we could get another chaperone in there. But this program does come with they're calling it a program director that they send from their company that goes with us. So there are 2 adults. So I think that's the bulk of it.
So, a couple of questions before the rest of the meeting. How many students do you currently have at this level that's such that they would potentially be eligible for enrichment?
I don't know. We just got access to our rosters a couple days ago. So I think what I remember might be about 12.
So you've got 12 students who are eligible, and you need to make, what was that?
That's what it says on paper, but they have allowed me to do trips with less than before. I think a lot of it is also he's familiar with, you know, a smaller school and that type of thing.
What about provisions? What about the fundraising?
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for it. As long as students want to do it, they follow through. I've had, in my experience, I've encountered 2 issues. One is that the fundraiser wasn't approved, and one is that the kids didn't end up following through. And I actually ended up paying back a lot of the money for the supplies. But I mean, I'm happy to do that. So really it would come down to the kids, and if they say they want to do it and they're committed to doing it, then absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, one of the concerns that the committee has had, not so this is makeup of the committee right now, but many of us, has been the ability for a student with limited means to be able to experience this, something maybe in your Spanish 5 class, but doesn't have easily $32 or to save that for college because it's not inconsequential cost.
Right.
So I think in my experience, there's almost always been some fundraising of some sort. I doubt it would raise 8 times $3,000. I doubt it would raise $25,000. But maybe, or at least something to offset.
Yeah. The last time that a couple of years ago when we went, I spent a lot of time looking for things, looking for scholarships, looking for grants. I was actually surprised at how few there were. Well, either that or I'm a terrible looker, and so we planned a couple different fundraisers. Like I said, the kids kind of dropped off towards the time they were supposed to happen. But I did notice on actually Students Love Travel new today, I was on the website and they had a scholarship, which I thought was great because now I know that that's new and we can apply for it, and the teacher applies for it. So, it would be something like, hey, we're doing this, the typical, if anyone wants to go, you're not sure, come talk to me. And then I get to start that process. So I really liked that. Another colleague mentioned to me the Walker Fund that I'm not totally familiar with. Maybe you are more. Okay. I don't know if that's an option as well. But I think that it's hard for me to answer that with a blanket statement because I think it does have to be almost like a case by case. If it is, one child that really has a lot of need, I almost wonder if there's other ways that we could go about, maybe like talking to people about sponsoring them or something like that, that I can't really get into that conversation if it's for 8 kids, but if it ends up being just 1 or 2, then I can have more direct conversations with different people and see what we can do.
And you did this 2 years ago, right? Just before the pandemic, was it February, right before everything caved in?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and actually, I couldn't go because I got in a car accident right before it. Yes, so one of my colleagues was able to take the kids regardless. Yeah, my accident was January 30th, so I was in the hospital when they left. But it worked out, I mean, not great for me, but great for them.
Do you have a question?
LNHS used to have some money in the pot for travel.
Yeah, there's in the student activity fund, there's a general portion of it where, if it's not collected for certain, if you collect it to go on the trip, you have to use it for the trip, but some of it falls into the excess.
I mean, the price seems very reasonable to me, given that's all inclusive, but that's a lot of money for a lot of people. And so I guess I'm just a little bit uncomfortable not having a solid plan in place for making sure that we're being inclusive and including students that might not have funds available, their parents, can't swing it. So I'm curious to see what else we can explore. I mean, it's gonna come up before we really know it, like this.
Mhm.
I mean, as I recall, your French, on the employee couldn't always get enough numbers to go over. She'd advertise not get enough numbers. So, I don't know, when do you have a drop dead date, like, which you have to know?
We can make, yes, we can make that date, and I think it says, this price is through to September 30th, right? And then it's obviously subject to change for obvious reasons. So I would make the date September 30th for all of these reasons. I mean, we need to know so we can plan, and we can't plan fundraisers, scholarships, whatever, until we know who's going.
How long have the students had this information for?
Now, I mentioned it to them last year.
Okay.
And I said, if we were to do a trip, how many of you would be interested? Of course, everyone's hand typically goes up. And I asked them, I said, I don't know what's gonna happen, but you have the summer. Plan, maybe work, save, just in case. And then we'll see what happens first thing in the fall. So, I think that those who are diligent and serious about it probably heeded that. And yeah, I mean, it's usually, I would have preferred to have longer time to have them plan and save and pay over time.
I mean, a lot of times I think we improve these trips in the 1 year because the trips don't issue. So just what you mentioned about telling the kids that there would be the opportunity to raise money and stuff.
Right.
Good that you mentioned that. In the future, maybe try to come up the year before you want the trip to go, so we can.
I did. I tried to hand this in last year.
Oh, okay.
I was told,
Come back with it.
yes, exactly.
So similar, I mean, Bob, you've raised a lot of the concerns that I've brought up a lot. I think I know a few years ago where you were working with us at Lenox, the teachers are no longer, they've done Latin America. I think the cost of that's significantly less, but also there was a lot of individual planning around that. I also, I guess I wonder, I share Megan Kirby's concerns about the price of it. I do think there's a lot of families with those burdens, students are working in their summer jobs or whatever, saving for a lot of different things. So I do worry about the precedent of now, all the trips are gonna be 3,000, well, really by the time they have expense, I think we're gonna talk about 4,000. I think pretty close, well, maybe not, but still with having to get meals and their own personal expenses, it does get up there, which is high. The other question I have, which Dr. Gosselin, I'm not sure you can answer, is since there's been a moratorium on these kinds of trips for the last couple of years, is there then, and we kind of went through this, Mr. Vaughn, you may remember, it used to be not more of a concerted effort, as if there's no effort on your part, we just had a global pandemic, more about the idea of trying to stagger and have these things on the calendar so that students and families, especially those with multiple kids in school, can really think about it and plan. And I also wonder, put it out there, if we did more fundraising as sort of more of a a student-wide effort of like, an international, club, like there was more of an effort toward, bringing some money together to help for all the activities. And we just try to think of things in terms of the ways in which something that's this pricey really differentiates and puts a lot of burden on families. And that's my concern. It's the same concern that's been expressed here. Wondering also if there are, not second guessing all the work you put into this, because you have to find companies that are reliable and that offer a great opportunity. I wonder if something more affordable would come from example for example, going to Puerto Rico, which is American
Absolutely,
close.
it
Certainly I've taken my family to Puerto Rico and had great language opportunities that I didn't care about myself because I can't speak Spanish, but my daughter does, and so it's great opportunities to utilize that language. But I'm not trying to it sounds like a second guess, but it's more of a brainstorming idea of thinking in terms of the extreme value, and I agree, the value of travel and immersion, meeting, going to other cultures, and also that sense of responsibility for young people as they go off and to go to college. But I really do worry about how these prices have kind of been going up and up. I don't know if I'm having a hard time with that.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to speak to some of that.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to know, and I don't expect anyone to know this except for me in this room, but this price is actually only about $400 more expensive than the last trip was. So considering everything that has happened in the world since then, from a money standpoint, not considering how much it is for each family to pay, but just for the price of it, it actually hasn't gone up that much. Secondly, just to touch on, going to Mexico as opposed to Europe. Naturally, that's going to be more expensive. There's a lot to be said for the safety. And I lived in Madrid for 2 years. I know that country very, very well. If I'm going to be taking students and children of other parents, I need to go to a place where I know and feel safe taking my own family. I used to travel to South America a lot, actually, and there's a reason why I moved that travel to Europe. Safety to me is the number one priority, and that is where a lot of the decision between going to South America, Central America versus Europe comes into play for me personally, because you're right, it is a lot cheaper. And my understanding, my predecessor who traveled a lot to Argentina had a similar experience in Argentina, which is why he went there. He was much more familiar with those surroundings. So it made sense. So I think those are a couple other important things just to know the background behind it as well. Because the price is scary. The other thing, and I mentioned this company earlier, there's huge hundreds of tour companies. I get mail from them every day. I mean, I get like bags that they send, they want our business. And those huge companies are actually more expensive. So this is, it's a customized trip. There is a way, I can make this a cheaper trip. We could do something like Madrid and Toledo, Madrid, Segovia, Toledo. And it would go down a little bit. And that'd be fine. I'm fine with that. They'd be fine with that. The reason why I chose Madrid and Sevilla is only to give them two totally different cultural experiences within one country, which is kind of nice. But, and it might drop it down. I'm not even sure how much, a few hundred, I'm sure. So I think those are all things to consider as well, right? Because it just, I need my own peace of mind that these kids are going to be safe and
I would just urge caution on that line of thinking. Someone would say, well, hey, there was a train bombing in Madrid, so how safe is that, right? Like the other place, if this is a reputable tour company, the other places they list are Spanish-speaking countries, Costa Rica, Puerto Rico, and Peru. So again, I don't think they're going to places where we're seeing lots of governmental instability or being waged. So
but I don't know.
I think safety is too, but I just don't want to paint certain countries or cultures as saying like they're more or less safe. I think that there may be some debate around some of those things depending on geopolitical climate at the time. So
Sure. I'm speaking of my own personal experiences, how I've changed my practice of traveling because of things that have happened when I've been traveling. And I don't want to bring kids to a place where I'm not sure, I don't know the country, I don't know these cities. You know, I can only rely on this program director. Here, it oftentimes, I know more than the program director, and that I feel safe bringing children into a situation like that. That's all I'm saying.
Yes, the price seems extremely reasonable to me. I mean, it is expensive, but whether I'm benchmarking against what the Europe trip cost when I was in high school, or just what travel prices are, I was surprised it was this low. And so it seems to me that, first of all, thank you for putting together and trying to offer an opportunity like this. The question we should be asking is whether we want to offer an opportunity for juniors and seniors to travel to Europe and use the language skills they've worked so hard developing. And that, I think, is sort of a quintessentially valuable experience and one that we should want to offer as a school. So, I mean, Puerto Rico's just not the same. Puerto Rico's lovely. I love Puerto Rico, but that's not the same thing. And so, I certainly hope we do it and offer something like this because I think a lot of kids will miss out if we don't, and it's not clear to me who we're helping if we choose not to offer something.
My original comments, I said just that, I mean, I look at the price and just comparing what it is to travel out of the country now, it seems very reasonable. But I do think you can think it's reasonable and want to make sure that everybody who wants to come gets included. I think there's a lot of ways you can get creative with fundraising. I mean, have we ever partnered with local businesses that might be good advertisement for them? There's a lot of things to think about how we can make it
Absolutely.
work. I agree with Warren that, I mean, was probably my favorite trip senior year of high school, and I'll never forget it. I think a lot of people feel that way. And so I think it's very important to offer it, but also to be just sensitive to situations that other kids be going through. And we want those kids to participate, just like we want anybody to. But I think there's a lot of brainstorming and work that can be done to make that work for everybody.
Yeah,
Although,
absolutely.
if I could suggest, I don't know that it should be the language teacher's responsibility to do that. I mean, she's already taking on the responsibility of planning the trip and taking all the kids. If we as a district want to have a robust fundraising program, as she said, getting a bunch of juniors and seniors to do a fundraising project is a mission in its own right. So I think if we want to talk about how Lenox raises additional money or provides additional funding for these kinds of trips, that's great. But I think that should be a separate discussion from just the Spanish department.
Oh, absolutely, I absolutely agree. And I would love to see more of these trips being offered. And I think if we had a more robust, fundraising program, committee, whatever you want to call it within the school district, we would be more comfortable seeing these things come to us and say, oh yeah, we have measures in place that we can use for those who aren't able to pay out of pocket. These trips are really invaluable, especially for seniors, juniors, that age. Getting out of the US in itself is huge, right? But I agree with you that I think that it would make these types of things a lot easier to discuss if we knew that we had the programming in place, so to speak. And that being said, I don't know if it's who that responsibility goes to, but I'd be happy to, discuss.
And we do have, LEAF, which is the Lenox Education Foundation, the Berkshire's Connect Foundation, so those funds could be something that can be reserved for scholarships, so we're planning that way. Other options, we do have community partners, we do have a liaison with these business partners, and so, oftentimes we're asking them to volunteer for different things and programs, but there are times when the business partners also say, if there's anything you guys need, financially, let us know too. So, those folks may be able to, have conversations with some of those business partners around that.
The last time that we went, I did reach out to LEAF and the Taconic Foundation, and I got negative responses from them. But
Did the meeting just-
maybe you need to ask.
Did the meeting just, no, we don't have anything for that, or do you think that
They said
maybe there was
this
something
doesn't
lacking in the process?
This
Yeah, that's
doesn't
what
fit
it
the profile, or this doesn't fit what we're created for, type of a thing.
And maybe it's just been the way that it was back at the time, and again, I do know that Berkshire Klein Foundation is offering lots of trainings and workshops on equity, so again, I think that this would be something to say, hey, that this is helping to provide equity, you know, so to reserve a scholarship or two for underprivileged youth to get more trip, I think would be very on brand if that's what it is, so.
Yeah, I'm on your side.
Yeah.
That was just my experience, and I was surprised by it.
I do think Berkshire Taconic likes to see numbers. So they want to see a high number of kids benefiting from the money that they are donating or giving to us in grants. So that may be part of it too. If it's a smaller number, they tend to ask, you know, is there a chance for more to participate?
And that being said, we've also, a lot of the years, underexpended some of those funds, largely due to COVID, but so, you know, they've also reached out and said like, hey, if there's things, like, let us know, so, you know, they may be a little bit more willing to give to.
This raises a question for me that I think kind of goes to the issues of what everybody's saying, because this particular in front of us, and thank you for bringing this for us, but it does raise the question that we haven't been able to address in the last couple of years because of COVID, is that the benefit of trips in general, field trips off during COVID, and to some degree have been discussed when we've talked about, you know, lean budgets, et cetera. And I think the opportunities to explore and deepen learning isn't just in the area of language. It isn't just in the area of Europe. I mean, certainly trips. When my kids were in school, there was no trip to Washington, D.C. That has been created as part of the curriculum, I believe, in the 10th grade, as I'm doing with you. But in general, we talk about trips and opportunities for students to do deeper learning. I think maybe, I wonder if I know you need answers to move forward, but I wonder if we have an opportunity to meet again, if there's an opportunity to gauge where the students are, get exact numbers, get a sense of how much money we have available to help students who needs help. But then look at the global policy a little bit more about what do we do when trips come up? The ones that we've been familiar with have been 2 language trips, so 3 because it's Latin. So it's French, Latin, Spanish. And then at times in the past, there's been an art history class group that went through Leslie John Roach, who's retired, but I don't know, again, that hasn't had an opportunity to come up because of COVID. So if we can go back and look at our policies relative to trips and funding and look at it from an equitable point of view as well. I mean, I'd also love to see an opportunity for our students to go south and go into places like Alabama and Mississippi and do, you know, civil rights. I mean, our history work can also come into that. I know some students who were coming through National Honor Society, and this is about the anniversary of the crisis in Katrina, went down and actually 2 of my kids actually went and helped with a rehab program. They did rehabilitation to homes. And that was extraordinarily valuable, and especially for my oldest daughter, who was a senior, my son was a freshman. They went together with a lot of colleagues and they did work within the community. They learned a lot and they actually, you know, did some skills of a different type. So I think the opportunity to travel and immerse is super important. And I think we should look at it in a way, we're talking about, you know, Mr. Cass's commitment to financing, the opportunity for grant funding, that we bring that into a discussion that's kind of really headlined under trips and immersion of the educational opportunities, because I think sometimes there's a little bit more to it than just language. Language also being very important, but other learning also. So I'm not sure where that puts us for the deadline of what you need today.
Just mentioning the deadline, I'm just looking at their website, the deadline for applications for scholarships through this company is October 31st, and it has to go through the teacher.
October 31st for the following year. So not just for this trip, it would be for one that would be next year,
Well, does not include.
so the next calendar year, kind of thing. I saw it too, and I thought, oh,
Yeah,
that's
I
great,
know.
and then I saw that.
But that's, but February is the next calendar
It's next
year.
calendar
Yeah.
year.
Yeah, it's February 2023.
February school year, it's next
So
calendar.
Ms. Bainbridge Jordan, little did you suspect that your trip would
Spark
create
such a
this
great
type of,
conversation.
actually highlight perhaps
Yeah.
an area of funding that in general, I could see this discussion occurring in every single person who comes before us, who's sitting in your seat. And, you know, please, we're not putting you on the spot. You have just, I think, highlighted an area of perhaps where we would like to provide something that we currently do not have the mechanisms or the procedures to do. I don't know that in any way should look negatively upon, you know, what your trip, but it does bring out something that I think that the school committee could look at to a greater extent.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you mentioned like an international fundraising club. Exactly, or just a field trip fundraising fund. That's so
We're
important.
looking through LEAF and trying to understand maybe why, because technically, as a government body, our ability to actually do fundraising other than grant applications and partnerships, there's rules about that. So that's why LEAF was created, and was to be able to enhance opportunities for kids. So perhaps there's an opportunity to have another conversation with the board or the leaders of LEAF, Richard Taconic, our partners, and think about what is sort of a general number that we need to ensure equity, not put such a burden on kids. And I will say also, when it comes to kids and fundraising, and they shouldn't drop the ball, but Mr. Cass mentioned they shouldn't be expected. I mean, National Honor Society, they have a requirement to meet a certain number of hours. Sometimes there's an opportunity with partnerships where, you know, students like their prom, even they went and did volunteer work in order to be able to have their prom at the mountain, which I think was a great opportunity for students to participate. And you know, we owe in everything we do, we have to think about equity. So, you know, when the students are asked to do a fundraiser, I think it's reasonable to expect that they'll plan something, that they'll get adult support, of course, and that they'll follow through and get it done. Sometimes they're overburdened or maybe under-organized, but they can get there with leadership and support. But I think to solely put it on, I'll just use the proverbial car wash to make up the difference might be the part that's unfair. Them doing something, you know, some.
So, Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion to approve the trip to Spain during February break of calendar year 2020. Is that correct?
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
I just had one clarifying thing that you may have addressed this when I was trying to make sure we were connected here. The 32.50 and 71 are different numbers than the 31.50 and $36. Did you mention that, Reverend? That's this out?
No, but you're right. So what you're looking at on your computer was when I had originally tried to hand this in last year, but was told I couldn't. And because of that, I missed that deadline. And so now this is more expensive because of that.
That was just a clarifying question. Are there any other questions for Amy?
Just that I think that this scholarship program through the company looks to be valid for this particular trip, so I think.
I have a good relationship with Rob, so I
Awesome.
am happy to reach out to him directly,
Yeah,
and he's
yeah.
really good about getting back to. And you know, and I'm happy to work, I don't know who I should contact, work with about like the LEAF and the Taconic, because if you guys think that that should have worked out, I'd really like to know why it didn't and maybe be able to get that. And also taking that idea of this club or whatever for across the board, you know, I think is a really good idea. And I'm happy to take that back to school and, you know, talk to Sal, see how we work with that. Because it is every year, you know, or every field trip, it is something to be considered. And to your point, usually the way I see my role in terms of fundraisers is more as a facilitator. And of course, you know, I have to fill out the forms to use the cafeteria or to use whatever. You know, and I do it based on, are you guys really gonna do this? You're really gonna do this, right? Because if you don't wanna do a car wash, we're not gonna do a car wash. I don't wanna do it either.
Right.
But if you wanna do a spaghetti dinner, let's do a spaghetti dinner. But if I buy all the stuff, you guys gotta come and do it.
Yeah.
You know, but so that's kind of, yes, right? Like some responsibility on them, and I will help do that official working for anything that they're game for real. So I'm happy to take all of this back with me.
Okay. We'll call for a vote. All in favor of David's motion?
And I guess I didn't
Yes.
hear.
Oh, I second.
Oh, thank you.
Opposed?
I said I'm supposed to.
Okay, all right.
Can I just though then say, I think that the work on our committee, and I'm not sure exactly what goes under finance or culture and learning, which is TLC, which I'm the chair of, but I would like to see us continue that dialogue. And really do want to recognize that it's not us saying more burden on you,
I know.
but the idea of really trying to come up with ways in which the resources are available as opposed to maybe feeling a little bit, and trying to catch something in the wind, maybe
Yeah.
make this policy more robust, make the resources more robust. And perhaps even when we're budgeting on our school committee dollars, when we look at that, do we say, well, where are we spending money on trips or support or cultural enhancement or whatever we call those things? What are we marking for that and how are we using it? And I think that's a conversation that we are responsible within the community to talk about and think about, and not trying to put it more
Right.
by thinking about the students.
I think for a department, I'm picturing in my head, a department fundraiser where it's all a general fund. And then however we decide to disperse it per language. But things that are going on all year long, not so it's just from now to January, where Spanish kids are freaking out trying to raise money, but it's on all the kids taking languages to have that onus. So that by the time they start when they're in ninth grade, so by the time they're eligible to go, they're like, I've been working on this since I was in maybe even seventh grade. And I can take ownership of this and use this money for sure. So, yeah.
All right, well, thank you,
Thank
Mary. You
you.
happen to be the first
Yeah.
person to come before us this year. Anybody who was in your position would have had to say.
Everyone after me can thank me.
So the original sheet had a front and back. And then-
Okay, the next item on the agenda, you're all set, is the superintendent's evaluation. And this was actually completed in June, but it was just after our meeting, so we're here at the end of August doing this. Because it has to be done in a public meeting. The superintendent's evaluation is the only one that's required to be public. And so,
The AC.
The AC. It's Walter's.
so.
Go ahead, turn it up.
So I compiled the comments that came from the seven of us, and and Mark and I shared this actually in June. I gave you an updated copy last week. So I'm just gonna run through, I'm gonna highlight a few things here. I know that Claire is just going to want to pick up on some of this for the paper, and other people may be interested. So the way this is done, we assess the progress toward the goals that the superintendent has selected. He had 5 goals last year. And we put that, 4 of us said that he met the goals, 1 said, said significant progress, and 1 said exceeded the goals. So in terms of the evaluation, we go with the met the goals. And then there are 4 standards that can go into it in more detail. But there's instructional leadership, management and operations, family and community engagement, and professional culture. And in all those areas, it was either proficient or exemplary by almost everybody. In management and operations, there was a concern that the budgeting process could have been a little bit stronger. But generally speaking, proficient or exemplary in that area. Evaluators then can put comments down about the overall thing, and then there'll be comments for each of the 4 sub-areas. So just a few highlights. Mark's personable, perceptive, available, and responsive to all in the district. Some of his goals this year are a bit more general. Next year, I expect them more targeted to strategic areas. Building meeting agendas, preparing reports and presentations for the school committee, and focusing his team on developing a vision of all the strong points. He set the tone for his administration and returned a sense of normalcy to the schools. As he progresses in his role, Dr. Gosselin should aim to become more assertive in setting clear strategic priorities for the district, building support and momentum for his vision, aligning resources in pursuit of them, and driving critical tasks to completion. Dr. Goss has been thoughtful, strategic, inclusive, and transparent in this process, becoming a new leader in LPS. He brings much knowledge and experience in a number of critical areas, such as special education and inclusive education practices. I was pleased that he has been a visible presence in sporting events, concerts, etc. His engagement in the school community has been very good. So then, we actually, evaluate each of the progress toward each of his goals, and it's a little bit different rating than the other ratings. This one you have did not meet, some progress, significant progress, met or exceeded. And in this case, met was the predominant response by committee members was that he met the goals. There were, in a couple of cases, he made significant progress, and a couple of cases exceeded. And moving on to the standard one, which is instructional leadership. Again, it was pretty much proficient or exemplary. One concern about data-informed decision making should be broader than just using MCAS response, MCAS response. And some of the comments were, he asked for 100-day plans for each administrator, pushing them to think strategically about their school requirements, what was most critical during those first days. The question of how are we doing is always a difficult one for a district to answer, and here it would be good to see Dr. Gosselin emphasize a broader range of data beyond MCAS test scores. That was the comment I just made. The district's internal benchmark data, for instance, could play a larger role, in particular in assessing how well we're bouncing back from school closures and remote learning. Dr. Gosselin also engaged leaders around their evaluation and assessment practices. I believe this process is ongoing and will be a multi-year process to see the positive results of this foundational work. It's clear that Dr. Gosselin is implementing a strategic and thoughtful process to engage the leadership and faculty teams to improve instruction and engagement. I also have great concerns regarding ongoing bullying issues at L and MHS for parent complaints, and that's something that we engaged a practice. Dr. Gosselin's handling of the transition from remote to in-person learning has been professional and seamless, successfully balancing considerations of the student, faculty, and the community. So that was standard one. Standard two is management and operations. And again, this was, pretty much proficient. A couple areas were needs improvement, and there were several exemplars in all 5 indicators on this also. His understanding of legal issues related to education is outstanding. He's kept school safety paramount in his work, both with respect to working with our town first responders, as well as listening to the expressed social and emotional needs of the students returning from COVID and hiring additional counselor. He worked closely with administrators and assistant superintendent preparing a responsible budget with comprehensive 5-year look back at actual expenses. He's initiated practices both in his office and throughout the district that will streamline electronic communication using the Google platform. Dr. Gosselin has had to juggle an uncommonly challenging set of operational issues, from COVID to asbestos remediation during his first year. In general, he's performed well, particularly ensuring that schools remain open full-time for in-person learning. He did important work in cleaning up the poorly managed budget that he inherited. And prior years, the improvement creation of fiscal cliff. Dr. Gosselin's well-versed in education law, ethics, and best practices, and ensured his knowledge about knowledge about Massachusetts law in particular was current and accurate. Early in his tenure, it became clear that the data information system with LPA and LPS had a number of challenges that needed to be corrected in order to transition to a more functional and usable system, which included a new website for our district as well as a complete conversion of the underlying data systems. Dr. Gosselin engaged directly in supporting our technology and information director to achieve these changes and upgrades despite being short a person that needed to be hired to support our technology goals, and that person has been hired. I was very impressed with Dr. Gosselin's participation and insight during the lengthy process of LEA negotiations for the name. Dr. Gosselin quickly identified and set in motion those areas of our technical information systems that need both an upgrade and rationalization. And then the third section, standard is family and community. And on the areas that we evaluated, there were almost exclusively 5 with provision and exemplary. Mark has enhanced the district's social media presence with a Facebook page and other ways to outreach to highlight the many LPS student and faculty events and successes. Family concerns and needed solutions occasionally reach the superintendent level. Mark encourages his administrators to address parental concerns at the building level. When they reach his desk, he works with parents to collaboratively reach solutions. Dr. Lawson has invested significant and much needed attention in communicating clearly and frequently with the broader community through email, through social media channels, an updated website, and a thorough COVID dashboard. Dr. Boston engaged with the Tri-Town Health team to ensure the LPS was prepared and responsive to the challenges posed by COVID-19 and to maximize student learning and engagement as well as safety and wellness for staff and students. I'm extremely pleased with Dr. Boston's frequent and detailed communication with both the school committee and outside stakeholders. His weekly superintendent updates keep the school committee members abreast of ongoing issues and upcoming events. Much appreciated. And then the final area of professional culture, which was again just about almost exclusively proficient and exemplary. His expectations that his administrators and educators be reflective about their practice and be willing to be vulnerable is an admirable goal, likely to take some time. He has open and honest discussions with his team about respecting all learners and their families. In the course of collective bargaining with the LEA, Dr. Dawson focused well on the importance of establishing and elevating the professionalism of the teaching staff. Dr. Dawson ensures the good work of LPS is highlighted and celebrated and works respectfully and collaboratively when there are issues or challenges that need to be addressed or corrected. So all in all, Mark, it's a very, very positive evaluation. And we're very pleased to be entering our second year of these.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the support this last year, and still a lot of work to do, but we're set to get at it.
So this new business is the GCG substitute policy, which is the nurses' compensation, and this is something that passed over to Oren as the chairman of the HR committee. You talk about. That's one.
Yeah, this is just something that Melissa had brought to the HR subcommittee. Essentially, our per diem for substitute nurses at $125 per day is significantly below the $150 to $175 per day elsewhere in the county, and it has the potential to be a real problem for given substitute nurse positions when needed. So she had proposed raising that. We all discussed it and agreed that made sense, that we should go up to 150 as of the start of this year, which would put us at the median, at least for the county. And if there were trouble finding people ready to get that rate, we could revisit again. So the whole HR subcommittee supported that and forwarded it on to this committee for its approval.
We want to have this is a first read, so this is really, we have to voting on it tonight for any questions.
Just want to thank and acknowledge. I'm new to the committee, so Mr. Cass, it's pretty brought that together. It made sense. Some discussion about where's the right place to be, right? It's always the case, but
It's always tricky, the nurses' substitute compensation, because we're dealing with a situation where people can go back and forth, whatever, but nursing has changed over the years such that this is an area where it's very difficult to get substitute nurses without paying.
Right, we are competing with other sectors of the economy.
So, Yeah, so we'll have a second reading at our next meeting, and then we'll September. Right, I think is our next meeting. Okay, I'm at the point now where we're ready to have a motion to go to executive session.
Just looking at the sheet up because I wasn't sure if there was a missing over comment. It's here, thank you.
Yeah.
So, we're waiting for a motion.
I'm waiting for someone to like read here.
I'll make a motion that we, for the purpose of MGL chapter 30A, section 21, discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining litigation without the intent to move, return.
You actually said a few of them.
Oh, okay, thank you. Need to chat, shoot it. So I make a motion, for the purpose of MGL chapter 30A, section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation, and MGL chapter 30A, section 21A7, to comply with or act under the authority of any general or special law or federal grant and aid requirements without intent to return.
Specify that your motion includes moving to executive session to the reference that
And that this being an executive session,
I
Didn't even.
and yes, it's being moved to executive session, thank you.
I'll second that. Thank you. I had it written down.
Okay, so this calls for a roll call vote.
is there discussion allowed for the vote?
Yes,
I wanted to ask, is it possible to just provide an update before we go into executive session, and just where things stand in this process? Because I want to know that the state of the process is not itself confidential.
the state of the bullying audit.
Yeah.
Okay, the bullying audit was completed this summer by the law firm Murphy S. Toomey Lane. After extensive interviewing in June and July. And the report was delivered a week ago. And discussing this. So this calls for a roll call vote.
David Rimler, aye.
Right, that's nine.
Bob Vaughn, aye.
Thank you, Kirby, I.
Or cast eye.
So we are out, we are not returning, so this is the end of our public meeting.